Like, I will not be taking a Colleen Hoover book recommendation seriously. Isn't really even fantasy. It's smut with a side plot of dragons. Like, who cares? I don't think these are heavily unpopular. Another day, another book-related video, except I actually do not make book-related video as common as I would like to, but today we're doing that. Now, I wanted to just kind of go over some of my bookish hot takes, and even though I am kind of becoming a believer.
You're not getting it, it's not clocking to you. It's not clocking to you that I'm
standing on business, is it?
In the fact that the social media-ification of books has led to the whole idea behind reading and the general just like knowledge and wanting to learn about different stories has kind of turned that into a consumable hobby, and I'm not a big fan of that, and I do talk about that in a few videos, but this is more of just me kind of explaining my own thoughts and feelings and opinions on books and just the general discussions that people are having revolving around books. Like, not all of these are necessarily about a book, but more about sometimes the community's reaction to books and other people's comments on books. How many times can I say books? I don't think these are heavily unpopular. I think they might piss off a few people, but I don't think they're that nasty or to the point where people are going to be like screaming at me. I think they're somewhat reasonable, but obviously, people are full of many different opinions and different perspectives on these matters, so I think they're hot takes in that sense. So if you think that they're not hot takes, then maybe that means you agree with them, but there might be some people out there. But I guess we'll see if they're hot takes or not. Okay, so my first hot take is I just don't like to reread books, and I don't think it's anything against the books themselves. I just am someone who, when I finish a book, I usually tend to have a fairly good memory of what happened in it, even years later. Of course, like, I forget some small plot points, and there are some books that I probably would like to reread just because I've probably forgotten like 90% of the plot because I read them when I was like 8. But in general, people will have like their comfort books, you know, books that they really like to reread over and over again. I just don't find much enjoyment from that. I would prefer to pick up a new book and learn a new story rather than kind of mull over a story that I've already read. And I think that's because a lot of reading for me is that like surprise of not really knowing how it's going to end or wanting to see how the author is going to take what's currently happening in the story and then evolve it into what the ending will eventually be. So that's the interesting part for me, at least. And I kind of find that that is not really there when you're rereading a book. I've never really met people who like harshly agree against this take. It's just kind of something that I've seen a lot of people online talk about how they like to reread books or their favorite books a lot. And I've just never really felt that urge to do that with books. Maybe I just haven't read a book that has urged me to do that so much. I think a book that is very deep and takes a few times over when you read it to fully understand it would be a good rereadable book. But I don't know if I've ever really read one like that, or I've read quite a few really, really good books, but I think I've been able to like capture the meaning in it in just one read. But I probably could get a deeper reading in it if I'd read it another time. I do understand that. This one is nuanced, but I think that a book can have bad characters or characters who are morally ambiguous, morally questionable, do morally questionable actions, and it can still be a good book. And of course, this is something that I think really depends on how the author portrays them, because if the author is trying to make them a good character and then fails miserably because that character is annoying. A lot of main characters, I feel like, have this thing that happens where they're supposed to be like the person everyone looks up to, but they end up being like your least favorite character. That is where I think that there is a problem with the story itself then, and the character didn't grow or there's no plot development that changes how that character acts. But if a character such as, I'm thinking like Casbrecker, or I haven't read The Picture of Dorian Gray, but I think that's kind of what is around, is that these characters aren't necessarily perfect people, but you don't have to have a perfect character in order for the story to still be good. I think you can learn a lot from stories that focus on characters who are deeply flawed and not the greatest individuals, because the lessons they learn are still applicable to everyone, because we're not perfect people. Everyone has flaws. And I think sometimes people will read a book and they'll be like, I hated this one character, and then rate the book like 1 star. Well, that's your own opinion. I'm not telling you that's the wrong thing to do. I personally just think that maybe that character was supposed to be unlikable, and them being unlikable was supposed to be something that enhanced the plot or changed some of the other characters' perspectives or just showed like the inner workings of that character and their development. And that is a very important part of books. Because if books were just about characters who were completely moral and did everything correctly, there would be no nuance, there would be no development, there would be no plot because no one would make mistakes. That is how plots start, is that mistakes are made, people mess up. This one, I don't know if this one will piss people off, but I think that some YA and children's books are written much better than some adult books, and I'm specifically looking at right now the current adult fantasy genre. I'm looking at Fourth Wing, especially. Me and my friends listened to that audiobook when we were on like a little road trip to California. We were laughing the entire time because not only is the writing so bad, the characters, nothing really happens with them. Main character, literally like a cardboard cutout of a person. My favorite characters were the dragons, who had like very minimum dialogue. It was a pretty bad book. I gave it 2 stars. I think that a lot of books that I read when I was a child, especially like Percy Jackson, who has great character development, the characters are very realistic and also had a plot that really, you never really knew how it was going to end, but you still were trusting that it was going to be a good ending, and it was. Hunger Games is a YA book. One of my opinions, one of the best well-structured plots and most like thematic books that there has ever been, and I love it. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I think those genuinely do a better job than a lot of the books, I think, at the current moment that are coming out. And I have beef with a lot of like specifically the romantasy section right now, but I will touch upon that later because I do have some hot takes coming on later in the video that kind of revolve around that sphere of the internet and those types of books. Speaking of those types of books, I forgot that my next point literally was about it, is that I am okay with smut. I think it's fine in a book because, one, you don't have to read it. I have quite a few friends, or even my mom just chooses to not really read those parts of books because they're not interested in them, or they find them not really like adding anything to the plot, which is fine. Like they'll literally just like flip through those pages and then keep reading because that's not what they're reading books for. And I am fine with people reading, sorry, I'm like in a really uncomfortable position. There we go. I'm fine with people reading those books. Like I am never going to tell people what they can and cannot read. I think people doing that are also being just as hypocritical as the people who are saying that they only read certain things. Like none of us have the power or like the authority, or no one would even care if any of us were like, you can't read that. Who cares? But I do think that sometimes you can really tell when a book was written solely for smut. And while that's fine, like erotica books and all that stuff is okay. Like it's part of learning and being more like sex positive and stuff, which I think in and of itself is a good thing. I do, however, find that when it enters into other genres now where romantasy isn't really even fantasy, it's smut with a side plot of dragons, is where it's like, I don't even know if I would classify that as fantasy anymore. It just has a setting that's in fantasy, but none of the plot revolves around it. As I was saying, Fourth Wing is a pretty good example of this, where it's like you could tell that the book was written solely for mostly the romantic plot line, and they just had a little bit of fantasy in it. And that's no hate towards people who like the book and read it and enjoy that specific genre. I think that's fine. But I personally just don't really work with those books because you can tell that the people writing it might be really good at writing smut scenes, but then they're not very good at writing dialogue or a plot or any other kind of descriptive scenes, and so it kind of falls off, and you can really tell when those kind of books were written solely for that one thing. And that's where I just am kind of like, I don't really like it. Like if a book that I'm reading is genuinely really good and happens to have like a smut scene in it, I'm not going to be complaining. I will be fine. I'll read it and I'll, probably like it. But I think there's definitely, you can tell them there's a difference when something was added because they just thought it would enhance the plot versus someone writing an entire plot and story revolving around just smut. The next is not even just revolving specifically around literature and books, but also just in a lot of different creative outlets, is that I do have a hard time separating the art from the artist. And this has to do with a bunch of different series. The main ones I can think of are Harry Potter and then like the Throne of Glass ACOTAR series. I haven't read ACOTAR. I don't think I ever will. I've watched Cari Can Read's videos of her recapping what happens in those books, and they were 10 times more entertaining than I think the books ever will be. But I just have a hard time because J.K. Rowling is scum of the earth. I hate her. And I think as soon as I kind of started learning about these opinions that she has and her hatred for trans people. She is the biggest trans. I'm just thinking of that one Donald Trump clip that just came out where he's like, everybody wants to be trans, everybody trans. And it sounds like he's like declaring everyone is trans. I find that really funny. And the reason that I have a problem kind of differentiating art from the artist is because usually the person's art is directly influenced by the artist's perspective as well as opinions. And you can kind of tell that when you read the Harry Potter books specifically, is that a lot of her beliefs, and not necessarily like her transphobia, because that is not as prevalent, because guess what, there are no trans characters in Harry Potter. Who could have known? But also in the way that when she names characters of color, like, boy, what are you doing?
Don't do it.
And also the way that she uplifts the Aurors, who are pretty much the wizard police. And while the Aurors are portrayed as the good guys because they are arguably like fighting the Death Eaters, it's still, I don't know. And the whole romanticization of the Death Eaters, which to her credit, she didn't do. She did not romanticize the Death Eaters. That was mostly the fandom that out of it. And how people will get Death Eater tattoos when they are a literal representation of the Nazis. They are the Wizarding World Nazis, and people are getting tattoos for them. And I'm like, oh my god, what are you guys doing? But that's not necessarily with her. I actually don't know enough about it to really put my few cents on that. But I do have difficulty doing it because she also just doesn't portray women very well in her books. Like, J.K. Rowling was heralded as this like amazing feminist author, and I'll give it to her. She became published and all that stuff at a time where it was harder for women to be published. I will always give credit to that. But she portrays characters very poorly. I mean, even Hermione, who is like seen to be one of like the smartest literary characters of all time, is still portrayed in a kind of annoying light, and you can tell that a lot of the times Harry and Ron are kind of like, oh, I hate her, like we're best friends with her, but like sometimes she gets on my nerves. And the other characters that are women are also just not portrayed very well, especially the female characters of color. Sarah J. Maas, I didn't really notice it as much. She does lack a lot of diversity in her books. That was with reading Throne of Glass. I was like, girl, like there are no characters of color in this, and the one character of color gets killed off in book 2. The one black character killed off, and I was like her death was literally like a growth point for the main character. Like, she served nothing other than to die, and I found a little bit of an issue with that, honestly, and I know a lot of other people have found issues with that too. And so, you know, lacking diversity, of course, is one of them. I think another would have to be these ideas that she kind of puts out about like conquering lands and stuff. I can't really remember because I read Throne of Glass like 4 years ago, but there's just some ideals in there that just don't sit well with me, and a lot of it is influenced by her own opinions. I don't really know a ton of her political opinions or whatnot. I kind of don't care about what she's doing, but I do know that this is one of her biggest like scandals, was that she posted a thing during Black Lives Matter about Breonna Taylor, which was a woman who inside of her house, she was a black woman who the police came into her house and shot her multiple times and killed her. You know, horrible thing, awful, very obvious example of police brutality and racism that is still very prevalent in the police force. And Sarah J. Maas posted a photo being like, rip Breonna Taylor, which that's good, yes, bring attention to that. But then she literally then in that same exact post was like, go read my new book. She used that tactic, that pain that was happening to the black community and has been happening to the black community for years, since the beginning of like colonization and this country and slavery. Use that pain and that harm that has been done to that community to put her book out there, which is problematic and I have a problem with, and therefore I'm not going to read any more of her books. I never was really going to, because I also don't think that they're the most great works of literary fiction. And yeah, I do have trouble separating that, and it's not just in books. I have it with like art as well, and people will say like, this book is amazing but this author is misogynistic and it shows in the book, and I'm like, okay, well, and then I don't want to read it, honestly. I think some of them are still important to kind of see like that's how people were thinking at the time, but to openly support and say like, this is an amazing book when the author is like very obviously a bad person and those bad beliefs that they have are prevalent in the book, I have a problem and I have an issue with that. This next hot take is not necessarily about books itself, but about like the reading community And it is that I don't think that there's any certain criteria that you have to meet in order to be deemed a reader. I think making it so that being a reader is like a title that you can earn, I think kind of takes away the point, as I said, of what reading is. Reading is not like something that you can label yourself as to make yourself seem more smart or like a more academic person. Reading is supposed to be something that you genuinely love because you want to learn new stories. You want to see the world through the perspectives of other people. I don't know. I've never really seen people be like these boxes that you specifically have to check, but I think that you could be someone who enjoys a book from time to time, really likes to read, but maybe doesn't have the time to do it. So maybe you read one book a year. You are still a reader. Someone who reads 1,000 books a year, which I don't know if that's possible, I'm sure someone's done it, versus someone who reads 2 books a year are both readers. One of them is not better than the other. They just simply maybe have more time to commit to it, and maybe that's their job, is to be a reader. Maybe they're a booktuber, anything like that. I think that making certain criteria to be part of a specific community is where we start to see hostility towards people who it's like, oh, you're not a reader because you don't annotate your books like with these specific Sharpies and highlighters. That doesn't make you a reader. Being a reader is just someone who enjoys stories and then reads books. You don't have to meet why did I just sound like a sprinkler? You don't have to meet a specific criteria or a specific amount of books read or a specific checklist in order to be a reader. You just are one. This one might be a little of a hot take, and that is I kind of disregard all BookTok recs now. And I mean this is that if someone is doing like a recommendation little like reel or YouTube short or TikTok, I don't have TikTok, but sometimes they end up on other platforms, and they will show like, these are the books that I have loved, some of the best books that I recommend to everybody. And then one of the first books is a book that I don't like or I just know is not a good book. I will probably disregard all the other books that they like. And that is probably not like the greatest thing to admit to, but it's mostly because I think that BookTok is a platform that pushes these books at you that are liked by many people, and I'm not going to disagree that these books are popular. Some books are popular for a reason, because they are good. Other books are popular because a few select people thought that it was really good, who maybe have not been readers for most of their life and kind of really picked up reading in 2020, and therefore that was like the first book they read back into getting into reading, which is fine. I support anyone getting back into reading. But then they think that because they read that, so look, it's like the best thing they've ever read, when there are books out there that are probably better. Like, I will not be taking a Colleen Hoover book recommendation seriously, nor will I be taking one about Fourth Wing. You will not get me to read Powerless. I swear to God. Specifically on YouTube, every single recommendation video has Powerless in it, and I understand that a lot of people are younger and really, really like that book because I think it is more YA. I also do know that there's some scandal that it literally stole its entire plot from Red Queen. I have just found that I've started to very much be a lot more critical of the books that I consume or the books that people suggest online, because people have different tastes, and also a lot of books that are made very popular sometimes don't live up to the hype. And it can be hard when you've had a bunch of people say, this book is amazing, you should totally read it, go read it. And then you read it and it's kind of mid. And then you kind of have to be like, oh, okay, maybe we don't have the same tastes, or maybe there's different levels of like what we expect from books. And that's okay to have different expectations. I've just personally gotten to the point where I don't take BookTok recommendations that seriously anymore. And this last one I think kind of builds out of every single hot take that I kind of have, is that it is okay to be critical of literature. Of course, I think that some people need to chill out when it comes to someone saying like, hey, I didn't really dislike this book, and them suddenly being up in the comments hating on this person because they didn't like this one book. That, we need to chill out, guys. It's okay to sometimes keep those very negative opinions that you have to yourself. I think I've seen Dylan Joseph talk about this on his YouTube channel and his Instagram. Great videos. I would totally go check him out. He talks a lot about how BookTok is not the greatest place for book recommendations, and also that people can be very rude if you disagree with them, and that one thing about literature is that we are supposed to disagree with each other. For some people, one book will be their favorite book of all time. For others, it will be their least favorite. And that's part of what makes us all different, is that we have different tastes. And being critical of literature is how we get such amazing literature. If we just read one thing and it was like fine or whatever, for your opinion and you didn't kind of voice that opinion and you just kind of were like, oh yeah, it was good, and left it at that, if you didn't critique it and show that maybe this could have been improved here, then we never get the masterpieces that we have. And it goes both ways, you know, don't be too overcritical of things. You don't have to deeply hate something, but it is okay to not like things and to openly voice it as long as you're being respectful about it. There is a point where people can get way over the top when they dislike something and make it their whole entire personality. I don't know if you've ever scrolled through Goodreads and Fable and looked at like the 1-star reviews of books. People hate with, and some of them will even voice that I didn't even finish the book, I DNF'd at 40%, and then we'll give it a 1-star review. And it's like, okay, you can dislike it, but I feel like rating it and writing an entire essay about a book that you read less than half of is, first of all, not going to give your entire opinion because you didn't finish it. You don't know how it ends. Maybe the ending saves the whole book. I don't know. And also, if you don't like a book that much, it's okay for you to just stop reading it and then just kind of forget about it. I think that holding on to that hatred and being so pissed about it that you write an entire essay on why you hate it is a little crazy. Of course, there are some things that we do need to critique like that, though. I think it's a very nuanced topic of like when to be critiquing something versus when to kind of take a step back. For me, if I don't like a book, I usually will maybe write a little bit about why I didn't like it, and then I will kind of just like push it aside because I don't want it to live rent-free in my head, this book that I didn't like. I don't get why people want to engage so much with things that they don't like, because although it is important to engage with things that maybe might be outside of your comfort zone, if you very obviously do not like a book, why would you force yourself to either keep reading it and then spend so much time focusing on why you hate it so much? That just confuses me a little bit. That is probably going to be where I wrap this up because I probably have a lot of other hot takes. I just can't think of them right now. But maybe if I can think of them, I'll make a part 2. But let me know what your guys' hot takes are. If you agree with some of mine, if you disagree, as I said, your own hot takes. I would love to know and have conversations with you about them in the comments, or if I make another video, discuss them as well. And I appreciate you guys for watching or making it to the end if you have. That really means a lot to me. Liking, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff if you want to. And I will see you guys in the next video. I love you and really appreciate the support.